Snow fell quietly that morning as the town of Grayson blinked itself awake under a pale, wintry sky. The streets were mostly empty, the kind of cold that crept through wool and bone alike. In a corner lot just off the main road, a small auto shop hummed with soft light and the metallic clink of tools. Inside, Jack wiped his hands on an old rag, smudging grease from his knuckles with a sigh that echoed louder than he meant it to. The coffee had gone cold hours ago, sitting untouched beside a stack of unpaid bills. A faded picture of a woman, his late wife, smiled up at him from the bulletin board behind the counter. He glanced at it just briefly before returning to the old Chevy that wouldn't start no matter how kindly he coaxed it. Jack Whitaker was a man of few words. Life had sanded him down to the essentials: work, home, and his daughter. At 38, his back ached like he was 50, but his eyes, though tired, held a softness that never quite faded, especially when he looked at Lily. Lily was 6 and as quiet as her father. She drew pictures on the floor beside the register most days, careful not to get underfoot. She never complained about the cold or the fact that her shoes had tiny holes he hadn't managed to patch yet. When she was hungry, she asked if there was end-of-day toast, the code word for stale bread and butter. When bedtime came, Jack read her stories, always the same ones because they didn't have many, and he never skipped a page, even when his stomach growled louder than the wind outside. He had been alone since Emily passed, 3 winters ago now. A car accident, a slippery road, and just like that, the color drained from his world. He never spoke about it, not even to Lily, who had been too small to remember much more than the smell of her mother's perfume. That morning had started like every other. Fix a car, sip some cold coffee, reassure Lily that someday they'd buy real peanut butter again. But fate, as it often does, had its own plans. It was just after closing when he saw her. Jack had stepped outside to lock the front gate, the wind biting through his jacket, when something or someone caught his eye. A woman standing just beyond the street lamp's reach, soaked to the bone, shivering. One high heel dangled from her hand. The other was lost somewhere behind her. And in her other arm, clutched tightly, was a bundle of white satin, what looked like a wedding dress. She didn't say a word. Jack stared for a moment, uncertain if she was real or just a ghost conjured by winter's haze. But when she stepped forward into the flickering light, he saw the bruised redness of her fingers, the tear tracks on her cheeks, and the haunted glint in her eyes. Without a word, he turned back and opened the shop door. "You can stay until the rain stops," he said softly, though it wasn't rain but snow now, thick and heavy. She hesitated, then nodded, her lips too cold to thank him. Inside, Lily looked up, her crayon still in hand. Jack gave her a reassuring nod, and the little girl simply scooted over, making space near the heater. The woman crouched beside her, carefully folding the dress over her lap as if it were something sacred. She didn't speak, but her eyes lingered on the child's drawing, a crooked house with a garden and 3 stick figures holding hands. Jack handed her a towel and an old hoodie from the back room. "Coffee's cold," he said, "but it's something." She smiled faintly, as though the gesture meant more than he could ever know. "I'm Jack," he offered, not expecting a name in return. She didn't give one. That night, he let her sleep on the cot in the break room, giving her an old fleece blanket and the last can of soup. Lily curled up beside him on the couch, whispering, "Is she okay, Daddy?" And he nodded, brushing a hand through her hair. "She's just tired, sweetheart. Just tired." He didn't sleep much, not out of fear, but curiosity. There was something familiar in her sadness, something he understood too well. The next morning, as the snow tapered into slush and the sun peeked shyly through the clouds, she was still there, quiet, calm, watching Lily as she drew a new picture, this time of the 3 of them. Jack made scrambled eggs with the last of what they had, pretending not to notice how the woman silently blinked back tears when Lily offered her the biggest spoon. "You don't have to explain," he said gently, placing a chipped mug in front of her. "Whatever it is, you're safe now." She looked at him for a long moment. Then, with a whisper of a smile, she simply said, "Thank you." As Jack returned to the garage, brushing off his wrench and forcing himself to focus, something slipped from her bag when she stood to stretch. A small silver locket, half open. He didn't mean to look. But he did. Inside was a photograph. His breath caught. It was a baby, a little girl, no more than a year old, wearing a blue knit cap that Jack recognized. Not just vaguely, but intimately. He had made that cap for Lily years ago. He turned slowly toward the break room, heart thudding in his chest, confusion rising like a tide. Who was she? And how did she have a picture of his daughter before Lily ever met her? She never told him her name. Not that first day, not the next. Jack didn't press. He wasn't the kind of man who hunted for answers before someone was ready to give them. In his line of work and life, he'd learned that silence often said more than words ever could. She stayed. One day turned into two, then quietly stretched into a week. The woman, who Lily began to call Miss, slipped easily into their modest rhythms. Each morning she would sweep the front steps before the snow piled too high. She found odd jobs to help around the shop, folding rags, sorting bolts by size. Lily adored her. They played together in the break room, the sound of crayons scribbling and soft laughter echoing over the whir of Jack's tools. At night she would hum lullabies to Lily while Jack watched from the doorway, arms crossed, brow softened. He didn't know the songs, but something about them tugged at the edges of memory, familiar and yet unreachable, like a dream just out of reach. She cooked too, simple things, cabbage stew, fried rice with whatever leftovers Jack brought home. One evening, he found his lunchbox packed and neatly labeled with a note in careful handwriting. "You fix cars. I fix lunch. Deal?" He chuckled quietly and never said a word. But the next day, her coffee had sugar in it. He still hated sweet things. But she smiled, and he figured that made it worth the taste. Jack had his own wounds, of course. On quiet nights when Lily was asleep and the heater buzzed low, they would sit by the back window, sharing silence in tea and mismatched mugs. "I used to be someone else," she said one evening, her voice barely more than a breath. "But that person was never really me." He didn't look at her, just let her speak. "I was supposed to get married," she continued. "Big wedding, 100 guests. But when I looked in the mirror, I saw a stranger in white, a stranger they wanted to fix." Jack looked down at the calluses on his hands. "You ran." She nodded. "And no one came after me." There was a long pause. "My wife died 3 years ago," he said finally. "We were going to start a small garage together. Life had other plans." Their eyes met for the first time that night. Not just glances, but a mutual recognition. Not pity, not curiosity. Understanding. Somehow in that tiny shop filled with rusted tools and broken engines, they had built something tender, quiet, real. But good things, Jack knew, rarely lasted. It was the first Thursday of March. Lily had gone to school, her little boots leaving heart-shaped prints in the snow, and Jack had a carburetor to fix. He called out for Miss, but the shop was silent. She was gone. Not a note, not a sound. Her coat was missing. The folded wedding dress, too. All that remained was a torn scrap of fabric caught on the backroom door, and the locket, half buried beneath Lily's crayon box. With shaking hands, Jack picked it up. Inside the locket wasn't just a photo. There was a folded paper, so small it felt weightless. It was a birth certificate, and not just any name. Lillian Grace Whitaker. Mother, Evelyn Marlowe. Jack's heart slammed against his ribs. Marlowe. That name. It stirred something distant. Newspaper articles he'd half read years ago. Gossip from customers about some billionaire's wayward daughter. Evelyn. The woman who had rocked Lily to sleep. The woman who had held Jack's baby before he ever knew she existed. He stumbled back, breath catching in his throat. Evelyn Marlowe wasn't just a stranger in a storm. She was someone who knew his child, who had known her from the beginning. But how? And why hide it? He couldn't sleep that night. Lily clutched her stuffed rabbit, asking, "Daddy, where's Miss?" Her eyes were wide, wet. Jack tried to smile. "She had to go somewhere, sweetheart." "Will she come back?" He didn't answer. Instead, he stared at the photo in the locket. A much younger Evelyn, before the shadows in her eyes, holding a newborn baby girl wrapped in a blue blanket Jack had once knitted when he believed he'd be a father to a son or daughter never born. She'd said nothing about the photo, about Lily, about their connection. Was Evelyn Lily's real mother? Was she the woman who, in the chaotic grief after Emily's death, had stepped in, then disappeared before Jack could find her? The timeline was a blur. Jack remembered the weeks after Emily's accident, the hospital, the foster arrangements, the baby girl found at a shelter with no name, only a note. Please give her to someone kind. He never questioned it. Lily had felt like his from the moment he held her, but now everything was upside down. Jack closed the shop the next day. He couldn't focus. He couldn't eat. The silence in the garage felt louder without Evelyn's humming in the background. Her scent still lingered on Lily's pillow, like faint roses in winter wind. He searched the name, Evelyn Marlowe, on a customer's forgotten phone. Dozens of headlines exploded onto the screen. Marlowe heiress missing on wedding day. Runaway bride believed to have fled the country. Billionaire father posts reward for information. Jack rubbed his eyes, disbelief burning behind his skull. She hadn't just disappeared. She had vanished. From a life of gold and glass mansions into his cold little shop. And she left behind the only proof she had ever existed in his world, a child, and a note tucked under Lily's pillow that night. It read, "You were the only one who made me feel safe. Don't hate me. I just wasn't ready for you to know everything. But I promise, I'll come back. For her, for you, if you'll let me." Jack didn't sleep, but he kept the locket close. And every night, as Lily asked the same question, "Is she coming back, Daddy?" he would look out the window at the snow now melting into spring and whisper, "I hope so, sweetheart. I really do." Spring arrived slowly in Grayson. The snow gave way to muddy roads and shy crocuses pushing through thawed soil. Jack's garage stayed open as always. Worn tires still needed replacing. Engines still sputtered awake under his steady hands. But something was missing. Or rather, someone. Evelyn. It had been 2 months since she vanished. Jack stopped searching the news. The more he read, the more unreal it all seemed. The heiress of the Marlowe fortune. Vanished from her wedding, last seen near the outskirts of town. Some tabloids said she'd gone mad. Others claimed she was in hiding from her father's enemies. But Jack didn't care about the headlines. He cared about the woman who taught Lily how to braid ribbons, who hummed lullabies at night, who smiled like it cost her something, and gave it anyway. And Lily missed her. She still drew 3 figures in her pictures, still set aside a spoon at dinner, just in case Miss comes home. Jack didn't have the heart to correct her. One afternoon while cleaning out the break room, Jack found a small envelope tucked behind the bookshelf. It was addressed in delicate handwriting. To Jack. Read when you're ready. His hands trembled as he opened it. Dear Jack, I never meant to lie. I only meant to survive. When I ran that night, in the wedding dress, with the snow soaking my bones, I wasn't running from a man. I was running from the version of myself they created. The perfect daughter, the perfect wife, the perfect product of the Marlowe name. But I was none of those things. I was broken and terrified and desperately holding on to the one thing I ever did right, Lily. I gave birth to her in secret. My father didn't want the scandal, and the man who got me pregnant didn't even stay long enough to hear her heartbeat. They told me to give her up. I couldn't. But I also couldn't keep her. Not then. Not when I was still trapped in their world. So I made the hardest choice I've ever made. I left her at the doorstep of a place where I'd heard kindness still existed. And you proved that rumor true. When I found you again, I didn't know if I had the right to say who I was. But seeing you with her, seeing what you've given her, I couldn't take that away. You're her father, Jack, in every way that matters. But if you ever decide there's space for me, I'll be waiting. Always, Evelyn. Jack folded the letter slowly, setting it down with care, as though it were made of something fragile and living. For a long time he didn't move, and then he stood, walked into Lily's room, and sat beside her on the bed. "Do you remember when we talked about families?" he asked gently. Lily looked up from her coloring book and nodded. "You said family is who loves you." He smiled. "That's right." He paused. "What if someone else loved you too? Someone who helped you before Daddy even knew how to?" Lily tilted her head. "Like Miss?" Jack swallowed. "Exactly like her." Her face brightened in that innocent way only children can. "So she is family?" He nodded. "She's your mom, Lily." Silence filled the room, broken only by the soft whir of the heater. Then Lily smiled, big and simple. "Then I really hope she comes back." She did. Not in the way Jack expected. It was a Sunday afternoon, the sky flushed with gold, when a black car pulled up quietly outside the garage. A driver stepped out and opened the back door, and then she emerged. Evelyn. Not the shivering woman in satin, not the girl in hiding, but someone new. She wore a soft gray coat, her hair tied back, her eyes clear. There was no entourage, no press, no pretense, just her. She stepped forward slowly, stopping just shy of the entrance. Jack was wiping down his hands when he looked up, and froze. Neither spoke for a moment, and then she smiled, soft, trembling. "Hi." He blinked. "You're really here." "I said I'd come back." He looked at her, this woman who had once vanished into snow, who carried so much pain behind her eyes, and still, she was here. "I left because I didn't think I deserved you," she whispered, "but now I know. You're my miracle." He didn't say anything. Instead, he stepped forward and wrapped her in his arms, slowly, carefully, like holding something he'd thought he'd lost forever. From the doorway, Lily squealed, "Miss!" Evelyn pulled away, tears brimming. Jack knelt beside his daughter. "Lily," he said softly, "this is your mom." Her real name is Evelyn. Lily looked up wide-eyed. "You're my mommy." Evelyn nodded, kneeling. If you want me to be." Lily didn't hesitate. She threw her arms around Evelyn's neck. "I always knew you were magic," she whispered. The days that followed weren't perfect, but they were real. There were long talks between Jack and Evelyn, honest ones, about Lily, about grief, about what they wanted next. There were questions, some hard to answer, but through it all there was healing. Evelyn didn't return to her old life. She didn't want it. Instead, she bought a small house near the garage, quiet, warm, with a garden Lily could play in. Some nights she still stayed at the shop, not because she had to, but because she wanted to be close to the only place she'd ever truly been seen. And one evening, under the soft glow of string lights in the garage yard, Lily tugged at Jack's sleeve and asked, "Daddy, can we keep her?" Jack looked at Evelyn, her fingers dusted with flour from baking bread, her laughter echoing as she chased Lily's rabbit around the grass. He smiled. "Only if she wants to stay forever." And she did, not for the money, not for escape, but for the mechanic who fixed more than just engines, and for the daughter who never stopped believing in miracles. In the end, it wasn't the house that mattered, or the name, or the past. It was the sound of laughter echoing down a dirt driveway, the smell of cinnamon rolls on Sunday mornings, the soft hum of love where silence used to live. It was who waited inside when they came home.